Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
It's 100% listener supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hi, good afternoon, and sorry, it's good afternoon here, but it's morning everywhere else, I believe. So good morning, America, good evening, Britain, good afternoon, Britain. It's Christine Joanna Hart, and it's the Queen of Hearts show, and we're off to a fantastic, interesting evening back with a guest we had on before, the biblical scholar, Dr. Michael Heiser. And he came, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, to talk about his really brilliant book, The Unseen Realm. Since then, I've read the book, so he's back on the show by very popular request. The show was very well received, and I had lots of emails saying, oh, please have him back. So I said, yep, as soon as I read the book, I'll have him back. So I've got him back tonight. So we're in great luck tonight, and hopefully we'll have a show undisturbed by any interference, and we'll be able to talk to him about the unseen realm, which basically is the face of God. So it's something that I myself had problems in seeing, in praying to God, and Michael's book, The Unseen Realm, it draws back the veil on the face of God, and it actually really does what it says on the label, and I was completely blown away when I read it. So, Michael, are you there?
I am here.
Excellent.
Thanks for the introduction.
How are you? I don't know what time it is over there in America.
It's 11 a.m. here.
Oh, it's morning. Okay.
Where I am, yeah, I'm on the West Coast.
Oh, right. Excellent. It's whereabouts are you again? I can't remember. Was it Oregon?
I'm in Bellingham, Washington.
Oh, Washington.
Which is about 100 miles north of Seattle.
Oh, of course. And it's Bellingham. I think I've been there. It's near Walla Walla Prison, isn't it? Or no, that was where the Hillside Strangler.
Yeah, there's there are a bunch of serial killers from this neck of the woods.
There is, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah. Well, my wife and kids, of course, have noticed that. But we're about an hour south of Vancouver in BC,
Right.
so kind of right, sandwiched in between Vancouver and Seattle.
Oh, excellent. And you've got the lovely scenery with the bears and the
Oh
waterfalls.
yeah,
Must be
yeah.
excellent.
I mean the you come here if you can handle the rain because there's basically two seasons, rainy season and not rainy season. But the not rainy season is spectacular.
Oh, excellent. I've been there actually years ago to the investigate the Hillside Strangler case. It's in Bellingham. That I'm pretty sure it was Bellingham. I didn't stay there very long. We went back to Walla Walla to go into the prison there to do the interview. I suppose would that be before your time? No.
I think. Well, boy, we've been here since 2004. So if that
It would
orients you,
be. Yeah, it would be. That was in the 70s.
okay.
Hmm, interesting. So I've actually read your book and was completely blown away by it. It's amazing. I actually felt that I saw I felt God as I was reading it, and I felt that that you, not being rude to yourself, but that you didn't write it, but that God wrote it through you. Is that a weird thing to say, or did you feel something like that going on?
Well, I your reaction is the kind of reaction that I hope to get because it's an academic book, but it's not. It wasn't an academic exercise, if that makes any sense, to you and to your listeners. I think there's real value in getting away from. And I meet so many like you, and I have to sort of include myself in this too, even though I had a pretty positive experience, at least as a teenager in college years, with what we would call, I guess, organized religion for the most part. But you reach a point, at least I did, that you have to decide what you value more. Do you value this thing that we call Scripture above tradition and above denominational wranglings or not? And I made the decision to just care about the text, and that was part of my graduate school experience as well. And you pay a price for that, but it's been a good price. For every person who has sort of disowned me, you get 5 or 10 that just look at you and say, well, where has this been all my life? So it is gratifying. It is more than an academic exercise, even though as an academic, I want it to be grounded in good research. But to be able to think the thoughts of the author in their own context, I think is a wonderful thing. I think you do get to see, the activity of God, the nature of God in a different way than is often mediated to us, especially by traditions that are competitors. Let's be honest. They compete with each other. They compete for attention. They compete for adherence. So if you want to get sort of beyond that, I would highly recommend it, and hopefully the book will help people to do that.
Yeah, it did. Why do you think it? I mean, I started reading it, and you write in a really simple way. You don't. I'm sure you could write in a very complex way, but you've chosen not to, and it's lovely and simple. And you start off reading it, and you think, "Oh, great, this is really easy to get into." And it starts off. I've got it in front of me. You mention about the Bible again, reading it for the first time, and then you go into part 2, the households of God, which is quite an exciting title. And then you think, oh, it's the title of a chapter. And you think, oh, this is going to, and then you think it's bound to be a letdown because it's such a brilliant title for a chapter, but it's not. It's so exciting when you go into it. It's really exciting. It reads like a novel, but obviously, it's not a novel, and you realize it is true, but it does read in that same exciting way. I have to say, I couldn't put it down. I read it in 70-page chunks, and I wanted to read on. I was pushing myself, but it was very rich. It was like eating a big Christmas cake with cognac and loads of different things on. You want to eat on because you think, yes, good, but you're like, oh God, I've got to put it down because it's really rich.
Well, I think part of the reason for that experiences, I mean, I do go essentially from Genesis to Revelation, because I thought that would be easier for people to track with, sort of the order of the books. But the real sort of way that kicks in, or the real reason for it, is that what the Bible it's an epic story. It's a narrative story, and there's a meta narrative that goes with it. But it's not taught that way. We don't read it that way because, again, of the way we're conditioned to read it. My original title for this, that I still like more than the title that the publisher essentially won this debate, but my original title for this was stolen from Tolkien. I wanted to call it The Myth That Is True. Again, with kudos to him, but and C.S. Lewis and people like that really had their head in meta narrative, again, and storytelling. But I think that's why you and you're not alone have the reaction to it that you just described, because it's just a neat story. I mean, there's lots of content that accrue to it, but if you can sort of follow the trajectories of the story, it becomes more readable just by virtue of what it is.
I can't read the Bible. I don't know why. I do try, and I was brought up a very strict Catholic with an aunt who was a nun, had religion stuffed down. I even stayed in a convent and we prayed for 4 hours at a time. I can't pick up the Bible. I just find it quite boring, I have to say. I know it might offend people to say, but I do.
If that was my experience, I'd agree with you.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I could read your book. I could lap that up. I mean, I really could, I mean, I've heard you talk and I'm like, wow, that's great. And so I thought, well, maybe his book won't be, so easy to get into, so exciting, but it was all there. And so it's odd, I can read your book with hunger, and I wish that I could pick the Bible up with that same hunger. And I don't know why. I think maybe that in the Bible, they perhaps have sort of sucked out all the that energy, that intense spirituality, perhaps. Do you think?
Well, part of the problem is really, we have a number of problems. One of them is who we are. Again, how we're conditioned to approach the Bible, our past experiences and whatnot. I mean, if you were an ancient person, and again, as I said on the previous show, one of my goals was to have the ancient Israelite in your head. If you have, the more of that person you have in your head, the more you will be able to pick out as you read the Bible itself. But the problem is we're so disconnected from that, and we're used to sitting in church and getting proof texts for things, or again, sermons that pull out one little line and sort of just go to town on it, either in a sort of mushy way or a sign of a kind of a beating it over your head way. And there's nothing that connects things together. There's no big story arc to it, and that's really more of a product of what we're exposed to in the Bible and the way we're exposed to it than what you actually get. But I'll admit, reading Scripture itself is difficult if you can't just sort of go with the flow and sort of pick up on the follow the thoughts of the writer and pick up on little things that they drop along the way in the way they tell the story. I often tell people this, and you can imagine what the reaction is in church when I say this, but I get questions like, hey, how can I get more out of my Bible? And my number one recommendation is you'd get more out of it if you read it like it was fiction. Because when you read fiction, you're just tuned, your mind just clicks into a mode that when you read something, I know I'm going to see this place again. I know I'm going to get this little phrase somewhere down the line. I know I'm going to see this character again. I'll bet I'm being told this because the writer's going to do something with this, either to misdirect me here or to bring me back full circle. In other words, you have an intuitive sense that the writer is doing something to you. When you read fiction. But we don't read the Bible that way. Again, we read it like a textbook. We read it like it's some sort of checklist, or just some sort of story whose only point is to, have us behave in a certain way or to give money or whatever it is. There's this sort of accrued manipulation factor that goes into it. But it, large portions of it are story. That's just what they are. But we don't read it that way, and so we never pick up on, we never develop any sensitivity to the writer's intent or agenda, and that's not a bad word. But again, since I've written a couple novels, I have an agenda. I want you to think a certain thing when you read this on this page, because I know what I'm going to do to you with that, and what I'm going to do with that. I have an overarching thought process that you can't see yet, and I'm sort of moving the herd in a certain way. And biblical books are like that, in the sense that the writers had reasons to say what they're saying. They're using devices and phrases and terms and ideas that their audience would have just picked up on immediately. But we're so disconnected from that. It can be a really difficult read.
Yeah. It was just Paul Stevens has joined us. Paul, hi.
Hiya.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey, Mike.
Hey.
How you doing?
Good. Good to hear your voice.
Yeah, good. You too.
You sound like you're in the background. Are you?
Mike, I'm always in the background.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was just talking.
Where I do my best work, Mike.
I was just talking to Michael about his book. I was just going through it. The chapters, they got really interesting titles, like the chapter 2, Households of the Gods, and it goes into God's entourage, God alone, as in heaven, so on earth, gardens and mountains, Eden, like no place on earth, only God is perfect, peril and providence. And then at the end, you have a section summary. Then you go into part 3, divine transgressions, trouble in paradise, like the Most High, divine transgression, the bad seed, divine allotment, cosmic geography, and then a section summary. And then we go into, there's a part 4, part 5, part 6, part 7, the kingdom already, who will go first, preeminent domain, a beneficial death, infiltration, sons of God, seed of Abraham, lower than the Elohim, this means war, choosing sides. And then part 8, the kingdom not yet, final verdict, foe from the north, the mount of assembly, describing the indescribable. And then of course it goes into, in the middle we've got the conquest and failure, the place of the serpent, the holy war. And it's really like a really amazing novel. I mean, it'd be fantastic if someone got it and made it into a movie, because there's so much there. And I really think you've managed somehow, it's an amazing thing, to get the real spiritual element, all the exciting stuff. And you've put it in a really exciting way. And it's just amazing. I got everything, and I was like, wow. And I was actually crying. I got through to a page about 35, and I was crying because I was reading it in the bar, so it didn't matter. It was tears coming because I actually felt God. I felt God. Firstly, I felt God move inside me, and then I just felt this, like I was being reunited with God. And I felt so grateful, because for years, when people say pray, they might as well say to me to eat cardboard or go and stare at that blank white wall over there. I would go through the motions of, dear God, please help me, give me some money, or dear God, help me with this and make me have good health. But I didn't really feel any connection, and I didn't really know who I was talking to. But when I got through the first 70 pages of your book, I was feeling God, and I was seeing God, and it was really, I felt like I was reuniting with something, and it really moved inside me that I was completely in tears. It was so, thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, what you're describing is the movement from, again, some impersonal exercise, to something personal. You can actually see a person,
Yes.
and follow God's thoughts, how
Yes.
he looks at people.
Yes.
And I get asked the question, all the time, and I understand the question, but I kind of bristle at the question a little bit too. Like I'll especially like from American Christians, they'll say, well, Mike, like, boy, this is a thick book, like what's the payoff? Let's be practical, what's the payoff? And when I hear that, the part of me is hearing that I've met another Christian now who wants me to convince them to care about this thing they call the Bible, this thing that they say is inspired. But on the other hand, it's actually a good question, and it's an important question. And the way I answer it is, look, if you care about essentially your status, how God looks at you, and your destiny, what God wants for you, then you need to start getting your head, wrapped around this material. You need to just put what you've been taught aside. I'm not anti-tradition, I'm not anti-creed, I'm not anti-whatever, but I'm basically apathetic to those things. They do serve a purpose. They're helpful to people at different points in their life. But if you want to really sort of get into the text, into this thing again that you assign sacred status to, you say is inspired and whatnot, if you're really serious about that, then you need to put aside these things, and you need to again try to get the Israelite in your head. Try to read these things in their original context, not a context that's been given to you, as well-meaning as it might have been, or as well-meaning as you've created for it. You need to put those things aside and start tracking on, again, how God looks at you and what your destiny is, what he's wanted for you all along. And not just you, but just for humanity. And that is the story. And so put that stuff aside, immerse yourself in the story, and hopefully it'll matter. You'll see those two things come into focus pretty quickly.
Mike, can I just ask for our listeners?
Sure.
As someone who's obviously an authority on the Bible, what does God want for us? What is the end game for God, that God has in mind for human beings?
Well, the end game is the original game, if we want to put it in those terms, and that is if you go back and you think about Eden. What was Eden? This is where the story begins. You have creation, but then you have God creating humanity. Of course, his invisible family, his spiritual family, his non-human family was already there. But God wants a blended family. God wants the children that he has made who are not human, they're divine, to live and coexist with his human family. He likes company, he likes family, and Eden is a place where heaven intersected with earth. It doesn't diminish the earth, but it is partnered alongside with earth. It's a cosmic, earthly existence all at the same time, and God is there. So God enjoys creating beings like himself, because only those beings can really share in who he is and how he feels about his family and what he wants to do. And their destiny is he wants them to be with him. He wants them to participate not only in caretaking and maintaining what he has created, but also to enjoy it, to tap into it and enjoy it for all it is and all it's worth. And that's what Eden was. Again, heaven intersects with earth. God is there with his family, families, wants us to enjoy them to enjoy us, and all of us collectively to know God and enjoy him forever. But that gets marred because God, of course, knows that to do this, the risk is when I make intelligent beings like me, that means sharing my attributes with them. And one of those attributes is freedom, the freedom to make decisions. But God deemed that risk preferable to essentially creating tin soldiers, automatons, robots, or nothing at all. And even when it goes, when things go to hell in a handbasket, so to speak, when rebellion is introduced into God's world, people ask, well, why doesn't God just end evil? Well, he could do that, but it would involve destroying all of us. And God would rather, endure not only the possibility, but also the reality of suffering and evil, so that we are here because he is big enough to use our freedom and not strip it away from us, not turn us into robots. Because as soon as God does that, we are no longer in the image of God. We are no longer imagers. We are no longer like him. And that's basically for God to admit, this was a bad idea. This was a bad idea. I was better off alone. But with God, there is no plan B. There is only plan A. God looks at us and says, this was a good idea. And I am big enough to bring things full circle. And I don't have to kill them. I don't have to make them robots. I don't have to do this. Besides me, I'm God. Besides me, there's no other. I will have my way in the end. And I will use other human imagers, other divine beings, my spirit, all these things at my disposal to make them desire and want and make the right choices, so that in the end, I will have a remnant. I will get to live with humanity on this place, and it will be globally what Eden was, again, initially, this tiny little spot, on Earth. I will have the ends that I seek, despite the fact that I'm willing to risk freedom on these beings, on these people.
Sure, and nowhere. I mean, I talk to a lot of Christians and non-Christians alike, but even Christians who portray that the ultimate destiny for the believer is an eternal life in heaven. But I've been through my Bible, and I can't see where the Bible says that the eternal destiny of the believer is in heaven.
Some other place, yeah.
Well, doesn't it say, from what I understand, what the Bible's saying is that the earth shall be restored to its glorious origins that God intended. So that ultimately the earth will be where the eternal destiny is for the believer, and to be
right. We will experience all that could have been experienced, in the beginning. With again, having things come full circle, enjoying the direct presence of God. And if you notice back in the garden, I mean, this is in the book too, even Genesis 3, after the fall, God is embodied. That God is walking. He's described in anthropomorphic terms. Adam and Eve can hear him as he walks through the garden. I mean, there's a constant emphasis on embodiment language, and that's the best way for God to mediate himself to us.
Is that Jesus?
I would describe it as, if Jesus of Nazareth was a historical person, born of Mary. So I don't think we can say, again, this is academic precision coming into view here. I don't think we can say precisely that was Jesus of Nazareth. What it was the second person of a Trinity embodied to relate to humanity, and that second person will be, Jesus of Nazareth, after, in the incarnation. So it's kind of 6 of one and half a dozen of another, but to preserve the theological niceties, I would say it that way. It kind of doesn't make any difference in experience, but God constantly wants to relate to humans that way.
Yeah, I did feel that when I was reading the book, that you can feel God here as a person, which is, I think that's the first. I've never read that anywhere else. And also what he wants for you, and a really strong feeling of being a child and having a father, and a really strong feeling of letting go of one's intellect. I mean, my intellect isn't really strong anyway, so it's no loss, but a feeling of letting go of that and really feeling your childish nature, and really feeling just letting go, and you've got someone there who knows better. That feeling I got as well.
Yeah, the family metaphors, are not just New Testament. They're very evident in the Old Testament, and they're deliberate. It's the best metaphor for God to, again, prompt people to write, to convey, again, this sense of how he looks at human beings. And what he, ultimately what he wants their destiny to be. He wants them to come home. And he wants to bring home to them, again, to bring things full circle. Again, there is no plan B. God could, unleash cosmic destructive power and say, well, yeah, I guess we're done now. That, we're all finished. There's no more evil. There's no more this. There's no more that. Yeah, there's no more family either. I actually, think it's kind of a flawed illustration or a flawed analogy, but your listeners may recall this, but so it has disconnections obviously with God and theology, but I'm a big fan of the X-Files, and there's this episode, I can't remember what season it is, but it's the one where they encounter a genie, and Mulder gets 3 wishes, and one of his wishes is for peace on Earth, and he goes outside and there's nobody there except him. And he's yelling for Scully. It's like, well, she's gone. Because if you want peace on Earth, you got to basically eliminate everybody. So here you go. Again, it's not a complete analogy or a precise one, but I think it does drive home the point that all of these things we sort of are uncomfortable with, either for legitimate reasons or not, directly derive from the fact that there are people here, and we don't want that solution, even though that's really the solution, and neither does God. That's not an option for him. There is no plan B. It is only plan A, and God will have plan A.
What about we spoke last time about the lesser gods, and I think you called him the Lord of Death, and I had kind of sorted it out in my mind about Satan with Shaitan, the attacker, but then I got to your book and I got to page 279, which is chapter 32, Prominent Domain, and this talked about the first temptation of Jesus. Satan tried to entice him. And I think down here, at some point, he's called, as the original rebel, the Nakash of Genesis, had achieved the status of the lead opposition to Yahweh. Is that the Nakash? Because they're not the lesser gods, are they? Is this now, are we talking about a different creature?
Yeah, there's 3. This is actually a really good rabbit trail and illustration of the disconnect that there is in church to what you actually read in the Bible. Now, if you asked a Christian today, hey, why is there evil? Why is there sin? Why is there evil? Why is the world just such, in the shape it's in? Why is there so much wickedness? 99.9% of Christians would say the fall, alluding to Genesis 3, the incident in the garden with the Nakash, the serpent figure. If you asked, again, an ancient Israelite that question, the fall is only one of 3 answers you would get. There are 3 reasons, not just one, why the world is what it is, again, in the Israelite mind. The first one is the fall. The Nakash, again, is that what happens in Eden is the initiation, the inauguration of rebellion, both in terms of humans and also in terms of divine beings. But then you have the Genesis 6 incident, and this is where Second Temple Judaism focuses. That you have another transgression, another wave, of divine transgression, the sons of God, who wind up, again, teaching humans, all sorts of things that they abuse. Warfare, even something as simple, simple living skills, civilization. I mean, this is the story. These things are sort of handed down, and they're, you have a whole crew of sons of God that decide, well, hey, we'd like to get in on this creative act, and we want a people too. We want our own families. And so they come down in the first 4 verses and raise up their own families, with humanity. And that has a disastrous result, again, in the biblical mind. So that's number 2. Number 3...
Is that in Genesis 6? Sorry.
Genesis 6, yeah, Genesis 6, 1 through 4. The third issue is what happens at Babel. And this is, again, we all know the Tower of Babel story. But if you go to Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9, instead of Genesis 11, we read that when the Most High divided up the nations, he divided them up according to the number of the sons of God. So the nations get allotted 2 lesser gods, because God is essentially divorcing humanity. He's disinheriting them, not completely, even though it looks pretty bad. They're not completely set aside, but because here we are after the flood, you're still not doing what I asked you to do. The goal is to spread Eden, to spread, the knowledge of who I am and what I want for you, throughout the world. Instead, they build this tower, to Babel again. And the whole logic of building a tower like this, a ziggurat, according to archaeology and Mesopotamian stuff, and that's the context for this. A ziggurat was part of a temple complex. You built one to locate the deity, to bring the deity to you. And God's like, well, this is not the point. You're missing the point again. So if you're not going to be content with me being your God and you want to do something else, fine. I'm going to disperse you. I'm going to disinherit you. I'm going to scatter you, and I'm going to assign you to lesser divine beings. Now, we're told in other passages that the goal of this somehow, someday, will be to, they're kind of placeholders. They're supposed to administer the good principles, the good law of God to these other nations, and Yahweh of Israel will eventually come back to them and redeem them, bring them back into the fold and reclaim them. Paul talks about this in Acts 17. But in the meantime, God says, okay, I'm divorcing you. And then the very next chapter in biblical history is the call of Abraham, where God starts over, which is why Deuteronomy 32:9, right after the dispensing of the nations to the sons of God, the next verse says, but Israel is Yahweh's portion. Jacob is his allotted inheritance. So right after that, God calls Abraham and says, I'm going to start over. We're going to try again this restoration of Eden thing again. The people here don't want to go with it, don't want to go with the plan. I'm going to let them have their way, and we'll see how that works. But I'm going to start over with this guy. And the rest of the Old Testament is framed by this nation against the other ones, Yahweh against the gods, because the other gods become corrupt. They start seducing the Israelites to idolatry, and we get the whole Old Testament story. So you get three reasons, three rebellions, instead of just one. What we do in church, organized Christianity, is you only ever hear about one. You only ever hear about the fall. Genesis 6 is put on the shelf. Genesis 11 is never framed in light of other passages like Deuteronomy 32. It's just a story about a building. And everything is attributed to this one event, and we lose the context for what's going on. Now, back to your temptation scene there with Jesus. The original rebel, the Nakash, is cast down, to the Eretz, to the earth. But Eretz is also a word for the underworld, the realm of the dead. If you bring in Isaiah 14 here, again, he wanted to be like the Most High. He is cast down to the ground. Again, he becomes Lord of the dead, and so on and so forth. He commands Sheol, again, the place.
Sorry,
of
is
the
this
dead.
is this Hades?
Yeah, it's again the bad place in the afterlife. There are a whole range of terms for it in different cultures. Sheol is the Hebrew term. Eretz is a Hebrew term. Hades is a Greek term. Tartarus is part of this place. Tartarus is sort of the special place in hell for the offenders of Genesis 6. But you get, the reason why he's called Lord of the Dead is not because he is sort of now overlord of the place of the dead, but also because humanity is now divorced from God. They're driven from Eden. They're no longer in the divine presence because they have rebelled. And so every person born after them, in biblical theology, is estranged from God. They will die, and they'll die in an estranged state, and God doesn't want that. But this is the result. This is the result of both divine rebellion and human rebellion. And so the story, the rest of the story, really all the way from that chapter on, is how do we get humanity back into the fold? How do we get them into right relationship, with their Father, with God?
Who's the Nakash? Is the Nakash the lesser gods?
The Nakash is a lesser god. He is an Elohim. So if you remember back in the chapter on Psalm 82, where we have this reference to the plural Elohim, in that psalm, the reference is specifically to the Elohim that inherit the nations in Deuteronomy 32:8-9. That's the Babel event. But in the discussion in that chapter, I think it's chapters 3 and 4 in the book, I comment about what the term Elohim means. Now, Christians typically get creeped out about plural Elohim, plural gods, for a very simple reason. When we see the letters G, O, and D, we mentally assign a specific set of unique attributes to the letters G, O, and D. And that's why, again, people get creeped out when you put an S on it, because there's only supposed to be one creator, one omniscient being, one, omnipresent and all this stuff. Well, the biblical writer did not think that way about the word Elohim. Elohim to them didn't mean a specific set of attributes. And how do we know that? Well, we know that because they use Elohim of half a dozen different entities. And I describe what those entities are in the book, give the passages. My favorite is 1 Samuel 28:13, where the disembodied Samuel, who is brought back to have a conversation with Saul, is called an Elohim. Well, no Israelite in their right mind would think that their dear departed uncle or their dear departed grandma was on the same level in terms of attributes as the God of Israel. But yet they're both called Elohim. Again, this tells you, if you're just paying attention to the text, that you can have plural Elohim and you're not violating the uniqueness of the God of Israel. You don't have attributes assigned to this term like the way we in the West and we as Christians are taught. When we see the letters G, O, and D, we think of one set of attributes, and there can be only one being that has them. That is not what's in the head of the biblical writers. Elohim just means, it's a term you would use for any entity in the spirit world. And that's why the Nakash is an Elohim. The sons of God who are put over the nations are Elohim. Yahweh is an Elohim. Hostile gods that get names later like Ashtaroth, she's an Elohim. I mean, anything that's in the spirit world, the disembodied spirit world, is an Elohim. So in that world, in that unseen realm, you have lots and lots of Elohim. That's just what they are. Elohim just means this is where you live. This is your domain. This is where you belong. Now, in that realm, there is rank. There is hierarchy. There is differentiation of attributes. Sons of God, for instance, is a rank term. It describes an elite entourage, an inner circle of decision makers. Those that immediately assist Yahweh with this or that or whatever. They basically, Yahweh makes decrees and they decide how to carry them out. We get that in 1 Kings 22. We get that in Daniel 4. We get that in Daniel 7. Again, these various places where you have divine council meetings or scenes in them. But that's a rank term. Angel, in Hebrew it's malach, Greek it's angelos. That's a rank term. It's a messenger. It's a job description. It's all it is. Now the Nakash is one of he's an Elohim like all the other ones, but his role, his punishment, is that now he is sent to the earth, or actually under the earth, the underworld. Instead of being above the Most High, like he wanted to be, he's actually sent to the lowest place. He's punished. But the problem is, since he brought humanity with him in rebellion, that he basically owns them. He owns their eternal destiny. He owns their souls because they have chosen to become rebels with him. And that's the problem, the fundamental problem, that God now has to act and do certain things. And ultimately this plays out in what Jesus does on the cross for lots of different reasons that I talk about in the book. But there has to be a path to redemption, to restore humanity to a right relationship to God, so that they can be not in the realm of the dead, which is ultimately destroyed in the book of Revelation. Death, and 1 Corinthians 15 says death was the last enemy to be destroyed. So ultimately, death is where that road leads. But those who are redeemed get to go back to a global Eden, as Paul was describing, and enjoy it forever, with their Creator, with the rest of their family. So when Jesus is confronted, has this meeting with the Satan figure, Satan, who is in the New Testament is linked back to the Nakash. of the fall of Genesis 3. Notice what Satan offers him. This is the kicker. You know, he's there conversing with Jesus, and he says, "Look, I will give you all of the nations of the world." Now that tells you that he knows who Jesus is, and so do the other demons in the Gospels. I mean, they refer to him as the Son of the Most High and all that. They get it. They know who he is, and they know what the end plan is. The end game is to re-inherit the nations that were disinherited, to turn the world back into this global Eden, you know, restore the kingdom of God, the good rule of God. He knows the end game, but he knows part of the end game is the nations who are in rebellion and dominated by other Elohim, who are corrupt, who are under judgment themselves. And Satan says, look, I can give you all these nations if you will just bow down and worship me. In other words, recognize me as the Most High. So we're back to Isaiah 14. We're back to the original, you know, hubris, you know, back in Eden. But he knows this is something Jesus needs to accomplish. And I think because, again, he's called the prince of the demons, the you know, prince of the power of the air and all this stuff. I think the Nakash gets primacy of place in sort of the fallen pecking order, if you want to call it that, because he was the first. He was the first one to be bold enough to transgress, and he owns humanity as a result. So I think what's going on there is Satan believes he can deliver this promise. I can deliver these nations to you if you will just fall down and worship me. Now, Jesus knows something he doesn't. He knows that what he really has to do, his mission here on earth, is to die. He knows he's going to get the nations. If he dies, you know, as a sacrificial death, he's going to get them anyway. And he's not about to spill the beans of the plan. So he just says, get lost. In effect, I don't need you for this. But I think it's a real offer, and it's a real confrontation. He is trying to, you know, he is trying to seduce Jesus into taking the easy path, so to speak. Because this is going to be hard. Jesus has never died before. He has never been separated from the Father. He has never taken the sins of the world upon himself. This is not an easy thing, and we see it in Gethsemane when he prays, you know, if it's possible, you know, Father, let this cup pass from me, but nevertheless, let your will be done, you know, not mine, and so on and so forth. So he goes through with it. Again, it's still a disturbing thing to him, even though he knows that this is the linchpin of the entire plan, because this will be the means. When I rise from the dead, it'll be the means to reverse the curse. It means that all those who follow me, who embrace me as Messiah, as Savior, are no longer going to be owned by Satan. They will die, you know, a natural death, but they will rise again because I will rise. I am the firstborn of the resurrection, and they will follow with me, and they will not be in the realm of the dead. They are no longer owned. So Jesus knows all this stuff, but it goes back to this cat and mouse game that I talk about elsewhere in the book about when Paul says in 1 Corinthians 2, had the rulers of this world known. Again, it's another title Paul uses for the powers of darkness, you know, the other Elohim, who are dominating, have the world under dominion. Had the rulers of this world never, you know, known, they would never have crucified the Lord of glory. They never would have done this because they're not idiots. Okay? They don't know that killing him is the thing that will be the catalyst to their own undoing and their own doom ultimately.
And that's a really, I remember when I first heard you describe that, Mike, in that way, because I know you're a Bible scholar and obviously very intelligent, but I think you've got a flair and a gift for presenting the gospel, you know, in a very colorful, but yet not sensational, but
passionate, spiritual.
Yeah, it's. I mean, when I heard the way you definitely have a gift for presenting the gospel in a very colorful way, and yet it stays, you know, it stays true. It's not like you're exaggerating the truth. But I remember when I first heard the way you described the gospel, I thought that was a serious victory that God pulled off there. A one man, you know, a one man job coming into hostile territory and outsmarting and out loving and just about out everything that could be done to.
Well, I love the encounters when when Jesus goes to Caesarea Philippi and then then to Hermon, because these places, the place of the serpent, Bashan, the region of Bashan, or in Semitic Bathan, which is a word for serpent, and again this traverses back into the wars with the descendants of the Nephilim and all this stuff in the Old Testament. So he goes to Caesarea Philippi, Banyas, Panyas, which used to be Dan, a cult center to Baal, who was the Semitic lord of the dead. Baal is the Semitic Satan figure, so it's the same guy, same issue there. And Bashan called in external literature, Canaanite literature as the gates of hell, the gateways to the netherworld. I mean, he's standing there with his disciples in this place, and that's when he asked his question: "Who do men say that I am?" And Peter, of course, we have Peter's confession now at the Christ, the Son of the living God, and he says, "That's good. Don't get a big head because the Spirit has revealed this to you," and so on and so forth. But that's when he says, "You're Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not be able to withstand it." And of course, the Catholics say, well, Peter's the rock, so that means he was the first pope, so we should all be Catholic. And Protestants say, no, the rock is God, based on 1 Corinthians 10, some reference to the rock there, and so we can't be Catholics. And I don't think that's the point at all. This rock is where they're standing. They are standing over the gates of hell. And Jesus is basically saying, you all know who this place, what this place is. You all know what went on here in ancient times. The Baal was worshipped here. Now we have Pan and Banyas and all this kind of stuff. We all know this is the realm of the dead. This is where Satan lives. I'm going to turn Satan's home into his tomb. Okay, upon this rock I will build my church. This is where it starts. And the gates of hell will not be able to withstand it. It's the church that's on the offensive, not on the defensive. And then it says, a few days later, 6 days later, they go up a little ways into the mountain. Well, there's only one mountain where Caesarea Philippi is, and that's Hermon, which was also Mount Bashan in the Old Testament. And Hermon, of course, is the place where the sons of God, the Watchers, descended back in Genesis 6, according to the Jewish retelling of the story. So everybody in Jewish culture knows what this place is about, and he picks that place to be transfigured. He takes Peter, James, and John a little ways further up in the mountain. He's transfigured in front of them, as if to say, "Here I am. Here I am." To all who the spirit world, this is who I really am. Now do something about it. And it's a serious thing, because what the gospel writers say is that after these two events, it says, from this point on, he began to teach his disciples that he had to go to Jerusalem and die. And they're freaked out. I mean, you put yourself in their shoes. It's like, look, here we are at Caesarea Philippi, the gates of hell, and Jesus is like, hey, look, I know you all think this is cool. We come here, we poke Satan in the eye, and now we go up to Mount Hermon, and we remind the rest of the forces of darkness who's really here, who I am. We poke them in the eye, and you think this is cool. Okay, I get it, but you need to know something. It's time now to turn to Jerusalem, go back down to Jerusalem, and I'm going to die there. And they just flip out. They can't handle it. But a week later, you have the triumphal entry. Everybody, oh, this is the Messiah. Throw the palms, at his feet and all this kind of stuff. And then a week after that, he's dead. But Jesus knows that is what has to happen. So he goes to these places and he picks a fight. It is time for the Son of Man to do what he came to do, to give his life a ransom for many. Luke 19:10. It is time to accomplish this. So we're going to go here. I'm promising you, we're going to begin something here that the gates of hell will not be able to prevail against. But now it's time to talk about the cost. Now it's time to talk about what is the thing that will initiate this, that has to be accomplished. The Son of Man needs to go to Jerusalem and die. And it's just totally unexpected, for the disciples. And they follow him, and it's looking good, the triumphal entry. And a week later, he's dead. And then we get the rest of the story. But this cosmic geographical stuff, this sort of subtext, supernatural subtext that's really lurking behind a lot of passages we read or we hear about, again, in church or Bible study or something like that, that if you're not tracking on, okay, what's the history of this place? Why would Jesus go here? Why would he say what he said when he was here? What this is, these kind of weird things he says. What's the point of them? Is he just trying to be clever? Is he just trying to be cryptic? What's going on here? Again, all of these things have backstories. There are threads that go deep, into the Old Testament. And again, that's what I'm trying to do in the book. I'm trying to enable readers and Bible students to sort of pick up the breadcrumb trails. And I do the academic thing. I give lots of sources. Everything in the book, again, the dirty little secret about the book is nothing is original to Mike. Everything is peer reviewed. And I don't mind telling people that because I want people to know I'm not making anything up. There's nothing I say in the book that I could not take to an academic conference and frankly have and read an academic paper on it in front of a room full of PhDs. Okay, it's the same.
Michael, can you stay with us for the second hour? I've got loads of questions. And
sure.
Excellent, and I hope our audience will. So we'll be back in 3 minutes, or I think it's about 4 minutes. Thanks, guys.
Who are you? I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you.
Why am I here?
You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision, which has led you inexorably here.
You haven't answered my question.
The Matrix is older than you know. As you are undoubtedly gathering, the anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equation.
Choice. The problem is choice.
Right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Be here Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time for Private Eye Matrix Revealed with Monique Lassonde.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Hi, it's Christian Joanna Hart back with my guest, Mike Heiser. And we're talking about Dr. Michael Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm. Mike, are you still there?
Oh, I'm still here.
Excellent. So that was really enjoyable. It was like listening to a story, actually, and it's quite late at night here. So I was like, oh, it's like it's a wonderful story. I just wanted you to go on. Your children are very lucky because they get all this, I suppose, constantly.
Well, whether they like it or not, they'll get it from time to time.
Oh gosh. What I wanted to ask you, he is called, the Lord of Death is called Nakash, and you're saying he's an Elohim. Why does he get the special name of Nakash, and what does Nakash mean?
Yeah, Nakash in Hebrew, again, it's typically translated serpent or snake. In Genesis 3 in English translations. And that's, it's a perfectly acceptable translation. But the term actually has 3 possible meanings. And I actually think that it's sort of selected deliberately because of its flexibility. So Hanakash in Hebrew, if that's a noun, well, that means the snake, the serpent. Okay, that's simple. But if we have, I hate to lapse into the grammar here, but if we have a definite article with a participle, if it's a verbal idea, then it means the one who dispenses divine knowledge.
Right.
And certainly that's what the character does, in a deceptive sort of way. He's a divine being that says, hey, I know stuff. Listen to me.
Yeah.
And if it's an adjective, though, Nakash, Hanakash would be to substantivize the adjective, again, to slip into the academic lingo. You would translate it as the shining one, which, again, is a stock description of divine beings, throughout the Bible and frankly other literatures as well. Luminosity, brilliance, shining, quality is again just part of the vocabulary. So I actually think that you could sort of use any of those in Genesis 3 and describe what's going on there. But the major point of the book is that, look, here you have this term. This is not just an animal. This is not just a member of the animal kingdom. This is a divine being. And again, this term is used because, either, okay, we're going to use, snake because it's a garden context and, whatnot. I mean, people can go all sorts of directions with this, but we actually, Christians actually know this, even though it kind of, in my experience, it's actually shocked people to say, hey, you might want to consider this being as more than an animal. Because when you get to the New Testament, it's very clear that this being is not just an animal. It's Satan can be transformed into an angel of light. You get these statements about this figure back in Genesis 3. It's very clear that this is a divine figure, a divine entity that either presents himself maybe in a serpentine appearance or maybe a bright appearance. Maybe it's the shining one. But regardless of which direction you want to go with the term, he is there, again, to dispense, to challenge, essentially, what God has told them. And it's interesting, again, a lot of people don't ever hear this in church either. You go to the account, Genesis 3, there's this phrase about him talking about that, if you learn this and that, you will become as God. Okay, we have the preposition for as and then Elohim. But when it comes around to that occurrence, the occurrence of the same phrase in verse 22, it's very clear that it should be translated as plural, because God says that the humans have become as one of us. They have become as Elohim. And I talk a lot in the book about what this knowledge of good and evil means. Why would it link humanity back to the Elohim plural, to the divine council, again, the heavenly family, that sort of thing. Because what we have described in the garden here is we have a member of the heavenly host, one Elohim, doesn't like the arrangement. Doesn't like the fact that God has created a human family or views them as rivals or something like that, and wants to cast himself as being the decision maker, as being like the Most High or above the Most High, above the stars of God, as Isaiah 14 says. Stars of God, of course, is a term used in Scripture for the rest of the sons of God. I want to be in control. And this entity, of course, is punished by God for this kind of hubris, this rebellion, this presumption. But humanity pays a cost because, again, they rebel in terms of transgressing what God asked them to do. But I spent a lot of time in the book, trying to describe, what the language is there for. God does want humans to be like his divine family. Okay, so it's not like God is trying to keep humanity from this destiny. He does have this destiny in mind, but you can't get there doing things your own way. God has a plan for it. He has something he wants done, in conjunction with this or first, and that is, to spread the presence of God, to spread what Eden is throughout the earth. But the Nakash comes in here and says, there's something God doesn't want you to know. There's this, there's that, and you're getting the short end of the stick here. And he, again, seduces humanity into rebellion. Now, the thought, I think, and again, this isn't unique to me, but I think what he's thinking, what the Nakash is thinking, is if I can get them to rebel, God will destroy them. Because God will just not tolerate, sin. He will not tolerate rebellion. Again, counting on this, and so then this place is ours. My status will be improved, or I can try something else because I want to be like the Most High. I can do a better job here. That isn't what happens. God doesn't destroy humanity because they are put out of Eden. They are put away from his direct presence, and Eden is no more until, of course, God tries to kickstart it again, because there is no plan B. But the end result that the Nakash is thinking about doesn't happen. God because God loves humanity. There's redemption. There's mercy. He's the one that actually gets, the short end of the stick because there's no redemption offered to him, but there is redemption offered to humanity. And again, the rest of the story, takes off from that point.
Yeah. Why isn't there any redemption to him, do you think?
Yeah, my gut reaction to it again is because I think they have, all indications are, even there's no explicit statement of this, all indications are that God, I don't know any other way to put it, but God loves humanity more than his divine family members who rebel, because those are consistently the kind of choices God makes when it comes to not giving up on humanity. And that might be, I mean, we can speculate, it's all speculative. We're not told, anywhere in the Bible beyond that, even though we can observe that pattern for sure. That is consistently the pattern. God favors humanity over his other creatures. But I think, we could speculate and say, well, maybe, they should have known better because they've been with God for an extended amount of time. The humans are sort of new to this. They're, they're weaker, they're embodied, they're lesser, they're this, they're that, the other thing. Again, it's all speculation. We know that they are lesser because they're embodied, because of Psalm 8, where we read that God has created humanity a little lower than the Elohim. Again, a little ontologically inferior because their embodiment has limitations than they are. So maybe he pities them more.
Yeah. Why do the Catholics teach us that there's a rebel angel? Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
It's all speculation at that point, but what we can say for sure is that's the pattern.
Right. Why do the Catholics teach about this rebel angel all the time?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Oh gosh.
I think because
Yeah.
I can hear you, but your voice is broken up a little bit. There's a little tinny sound to it.
Okay. Hopefully it will clear. If not, I'll go through to the studio.
Now you're back to normal.
Okay. Why do the Catholics teach about this rebel angel, and they call him Satan?
Well, I think it's sort of shorthand. I mean, I'm trying to give the Catholic Church here the benefit of the doubt. When I say shorthand, I mean they're sort of conflating different passages. Okay, we have this serpent figure, who's called Satan in the New Testament, and we have this Paul's reference to Satan can be transformed into an angel of light to deceive people. But
still, it's really confused it all. I mean,
I agree. Because they aren't following the biblical vocabulary. Again, that's why I called it shorthand. Now, the nice way to put it is, that's just convenient. It's shorthand for people. But negatively, I would say this. I think it's basically the result of not paying attention to the text that has sort of been the way things are in the organized church. In other words, somebody at some point, in the early history of the organized church sort of distilled scriptural content, and then that becomes what is taught to people, the distillation, the abbreviated version. The shorthand version.
It's also nonsense. I remember being told, and I was very close to the church. I remember thinking it doesn't make sense, and it sounds like a fairy tale, and it does sound like a fairy tale. And only now, God, the age I am, at middle age, am I learning the truth from you and from your book? I feel slightly resentful. Well, I'm being sarcastic there. I feel really resentful. And, I went to, I still go along to a Catholic church, and I went and spoke to my parish priest last time I had you on the show, and I read a bit of your book. I went along. I said, I'm just reading about the Lesser Gods, Father Dominic. And he said, you don't need to bother about them. I mean, why did he say that? You don't need to bother about them. It's the whole story. I mean, gosh, it's the whole story. Otherwise, you're just fed something that's like a sugary nursery rhyme to children, and of course they grow up and they think, what a load of rubbish. Of course they don't believe it, and they're hungering for a spirituality, and so they get sucked into the occult and Satanism, because, well, Satanism, whatever, you know, that dark side, because the dark sides make more sense. Because the sugary fairy story, they might as well be told about, you know, Santa Claus. It doesn't make sense, and so they reject it, and then they reject God.
No, amen. I mean, you know, that's good preaching. That'll preach it. I think all those observations are correct. I mean, you know, if you look at it academically, you can pinpoint a number of reasons why this disconnect at least became what it is. You know, why I'll give you a simple, you know, component of that. There's a language gap, and what I mean by that is, you know, church tradition reveres, and again, it's not that I don't view these guys as enemies or anything like that, but they review important, significant figures like Augustine, okay, or Irenaeus or Tertullian or these guys, but Augustine's sort of the big guy. Well, Augustine didn't even know Hebrew, and he confesses in his writings to hating Greek. I mean, he knew Greek, so he could work in Greek, but he was a Latinist. He is 400, almost 500 years removed from the New Testament era, and he's working in translation, and he is, as a theologian, I mean, he's brilliant, obviously. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm as smart as Augustine or, you know, somebody like that. He's a brilliant guy, but a lot of what he does theologically, again, he's dependent on translation, and also he's reacting to immediate controversies that are part of his day. So he's saying what he's saying about the Bible so that his readers believe A instead of believing B. But he had such stature, and there are others like him, that the church began to sort of look at what these people wrote and you know, distilling certain core elements of what they, you know, believe was the faith, and then those are the things, second, third, fourth, fifth degree removed from the text in its own context. Those are the things that get transmitted to people who come to church, rather than saying, hey, there's this, you know, let's go back to the text and let's think about it in its own context. Because if you do that, now you've discovered this now, so you're going to understand when I say this. When you decide to you know, be mentally aligned or owe your allegiance intellectually to what this text says and can say, what the text can sustain, that will at times put you at odds with the authority structure, because it doesn't reflect the little distillations that people get handed in church. And that becomes a threat to the institutions. And it shouldn't be. They should have enough security to say, well, it's great, you know, that you're reading this. It's great that you're studying Scripture. Thank goodness somebody takes this seriously, and encourage you. But instead, there's this guardedness. You might come across an idea that so-and-so wouldn't approve or didn't approve, you know, 1,000 years ago. Again, I'm not the enemy of creeds. I'm not the enemy of these sorts of things. You know, they are helpful to certain people at certain times. And you know, after I decided to become a Christian when I was a teenager, yeah, I was helped by this or that writer. I mean, of course. But again, if you commit yourself to this thing that we assign sacred status to, I mean, are we going to take it seriously or not? You know, if we really believe it is what we claim it to be, then shouldn't we go to that as the source of our teaching? I mean, to me, that makes sense. Shouldn't that have my allegiance as opposed to this guy who wrote this neat book over here, you know? And that's why I try to give people the breadcrumb trails. I try to give people the scriptural data and, you know, academic literature so that they can check up on me, because I don't want people to adopt something just because Mike said it. That's a disservice to, you know, the believing community. It's a disservice to anybody who really wants to try to study Scripture.
You give references, I mean, just completely all the way through. So many references at the bottom of each page, and then there's the summary. So if one wants to go deeper, they, you know, wants to check up, you know, on what you're saying, they've got full references to everything.
That's true, and that is literally the tip of the iceberg. I mean, in the book, I refer to a companion website for the book, and it's called it's moreunseenrealm.com, and every chapter gets its own page on that website. And I have bibliography there. I have some more technical discussion of certain points on that website, but even that, just a little bit more the tip of the iceberg. In the book, I don't know if you remember this, because it's sort of just introductory stuff. I make the comment that over the last 15 years, I have collected bibliography. I have collected enough sources so that my bibliography would be longer than the book. And that is not an exaggeration. Like on my website, I actually crowdsourced a project to put my bibliography together and tag it. I have 5,200 entries on academic literature collected that touches on anything written in the book. So I literally do. I could print out a bibliography for the stuff that I claim in the book. That is longer than the book. And again, that's a little overkill. People don't need that, but I use that again as my own reference library and whatnot. And then, I've shared it with people. But I think it's important for people to know that this isn't some guy, that's on the radio show and he had an inkling idea and decided to write a book about it. And isn't this so creative and imaginative? I'm glad that the prose, at least in places is nice and readable, and it's a good story, and because that was the intention. But you ought to know that underneath the surface, this is just based on lots and lots and lots of peer-reviewed material, because I want people to know it exists.
Exactly. It's brilliant. So that's More Unseen Realm, and they can go to that.
Moreunseenrealm.com.
Excellent. What's actually going on today in Hollywood? Because there's a lot of there's a lot of worship of setting worship. Someone pointed out to me today that closed eye, the one eye, means something about Set and Osiris, or someone tore out someone's eye, and when they show the one eye, it's kind of gloating over this one eye thing. What is that all about? And who's Set?
Yeah, Set is the, again, in Christian parlance, this is going to be somewhat imprecise, but he is the Satan figure because he's the god of disorder, the god of chaos. Now, in the Isis and Osiris and Seth story, the story is about a conflict, again, between Horus and Seth, and it follows on the heels of the Isis and Osiris story, where Osiris becomes, he's killed off again by this rival god, Seth, and he becomes Lord of the Dead in Egypt, and the offspring of Isis and Osiris is Horus. So the conflict again for who's going to be the ruler of the earth, ultimately, is between Seth and Horus at that point. So Seth is the disorder guy, the bad guy. Horus, of course, is the good guy, the white hat in the story. But the way it's used in occult references more broadly, again, pulling it out of the Egyptian context and more or less just sort of forgetting that. Since Seth is associated with disorder and chaos and tumult and all this stuff, he becomes an occult symbol for opposing, again, the order that God wants, in his world, and of course for people. So he becomes this adversarial Satan sort of figure. And you're right, it does pop up a lot. I tend to think that there are people within not just Hollywood, but within geopolitical power structures. Let's be really, really broad here. I think there are people who actually have sort of married their belief system to a commitment to at least imitating this figure. I will be like the Most High. I want to rule humanity, or the people that I consider my friends. And there is this sort of overlordship mentality. And some of them, I think, take it even further than that they are what could could be called Satanists, in that they want to align themselves with this chaotic deity figure that they either presume exists or hope exists or whatever. I think for the masses, though, it becomes sort of a trendy counterculture, part of the underground rebellion, or sort of the takeover rebellion spirit that pop culture really tries to perpetuate, especially something like the music industry too. That they're just into that, and it becomes sort of a neat thing to latch on to, and they may not assign the seriousness to it that others do, but it certainly communicates a certain set of ideas, whether the person who's kind of having fun with it or enjoying it or committed to it, it's more serious than they might realize.
It's hard. It's just hard to believe that people would go on the side of the Lord of Death rather than God, isn't it? Is it because they don't know God?
I think that's part of the reason. I also think that there's this human propensity to think, I'm going to get what I can out of this now, for the sake of my flesh, just to enjoy, as Jesus would say, or John, would say, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, all this kind of stuff. But I'll be able to get out if I need to. I'll be able to escape. I can handle this. I'm gonna do this and enjoy it. And you can think of it what you want. You can think of me what you want. But if I get in trouble or I need to get out, I can handle it. So I think there's a bit of self-deception with it too.
What did you want to say, Paul?
Can I just say, I just wanted to say, when I was actually into geopolitics, and I still am, of course, but I was at the geopolitics before I actually became a Christian. And one thing that another, we see in this new world order and this whole power structure and what's it all about, and what's going on and all this. Particularly in America, I would say there's almost a preoccupation with eschatology. You'd probably affirm that.
Yeah.
And now I'm an amillennialist, but that's rather trailing a little bit. But after I was actually converted, coupled with the scripture where Jesus in Matthew 28 says, "All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me," I really, really sort of had a major shift in terms of my fear and or paranoia of the great big new world order, because I came to the reality of the truth that Jesus Christ is in control and has all authority.
Yeah, and?
Well, so I think, particularly for Christians, I find it a little bit bizarre where people, and for the non-Christian, people should realize that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to Jesus Christ, and therefore we are not on Satan's we're not on his agenda. If that means Satan is under the authority and the new world order are under the authority of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I think what Paul's referring to is there is a propensity even among Christians to sort of how can I say this, to just generally pay more attention to dark power conspiracy stuff, because I don't know, is it cooler, is it more interesting and whatnot, and I think what Paul's saying it's bad theology.
Is it more carnal, I would think,
Yeah,
because
no,
it's not,
I think
it becomes boring, I think.
Well, I would put, you use the word carnality, and I think that is an appropriate term because of the flesh and our, let's put it this way, our humanness, because it's very easy for us to look at circumstances and base our hopes and fears upon what is visible to us, either in the news or whatever the source might be, and we tend to sort of say, well, the thing that I'm seeing the most, or the thing that I'm hearing about the most, that must have the most power, or that's the thing to watch out for, or in some cases people will want to align themselves with that, and frankly that just isn't the way God really does things. I'll give you an example. There's a lot of and there's some truth to this, but I'm using it to make a larger point. There are a lot of Christians in America that are really into this because they see, or at least they perceive, that the church, the believing church, is sort of losing power, losing authority, losing presence, that sort of thing. And part of that is because they've aligned church thinking to politics. Of course, I don't know how much clearer Jesus could have been when he said, "My kingdom is not of this world." But nevertheless, we see culturally that the church, Christianity, losing preeminence, losing prominence, even losing respect in this country. And so people, get freaked out about that and troubled by it. Well, guess what? That the church is a lot bigger than America. And the church in China, the church in Asia, the church in Africa is just growing by leaps and bounds. Often it's underground, but it has been growing through persecution for decades, even centuries. And so we need to think a little bit bigger than this. This is what attracts attention because it's America. And again, I'm not anti-American. I'm just saying this is, I'm more pro Kingdom of God than I am, pro America is what I'm trying to say. It's not to me an either or. It's just the right theological priority. But I think because we're human, we're flesh, we sort of get distracted by shiny objects, and we assign certain power, certain status, and we devote attention to this thing we can sort of see more, or that grabs our attention more than the slow, invisible, but inexorable advance of this thing we call the kingdom of God. God works under the radar a lot.
Yeah, and it's just like
he needs to bring it forth. He will.
Yeah, and I think as I say, it's probably. I mean, I think when you do become a Christian, when you receive the Holy Spirit, I think this stuff becomes. When I was converted and read the Bible, it became a lot more alive. But when you have, in Revelation 12, it says, "And they conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives."
Gosh, the tinny reception.
Satan, which is before Jesus Christ. You're cutting Satan and his new world order and these principalities. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Not really. You're cutting out terribly.
Okay, is that any better?
Little bit.
A little better.
Okay, I was just saying, when you look at scriptures like, in Revelation 12, they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto death. This is following in the footsteps of Jesus Christ himself, because that is how he overcame Satan. And he expects that for Christians, that we don't live in fear and that we don't love our lives unto death. Sorry?
Yeah, that's yeah.
I mean,
we don't need to be running scared of principalities and powers. If it means that we have to lay down our lives, that there's promises in the early in the letters in Revelation to the churches that Jesus gives. It's fear not, I am the first and the last, the living one. I died, and behold, I am alive. And he makes these promises. I have the keys of death and Hades, and it's very much stressed not to be too concerned about your physical life in this battle.
Oh.
Yeah, the sad thing is that it's easy for us, to those of us who aren't, pressed to the pain of death to do this or that or make this choice, So, but regardless, if you really believe. If you really believe the gospel, if you really believe that this world is not ultimately your home, and that your home will actually be this place, but so much better, for eternity, again, because you have, the power and the authority and the love of God behind you, because you've aligned yourself with Christ, if you really believe these things, that was the power, and it is the power of the church, because Christians will lay down their lives to do what's right, to advance the gospel, advance the kingdom, and that is following. I mean, Jesus set the example for that. But again, there are a lot of Christians. I'm not going to say that wouldn't do that. I think there are a lot, of course, that would, but short of that, they get very distracted by the circumstances of life, and so these things are easy to kind of latch onto, and I think you used the word obsession. I mean, they become distractions. And actually they take away from activity that would propel.
There's certainly a preoccupation. I've noticed that it's very, very big in America with the with the premillennial stuff and dispensationalism, because I have been through the Bible. And I cannot affirm, I affirm premillennialism, but I cannot affirm dispensationalism. And there's just this whole, obsession with the Antichrist and, the great beast of Revelation. It's almost as if it's just like there's nothing else to Christianity to some people except, the sensational stuff in Revelation. Let's figure out who the beast is, what the mark is.
But didn't we said that at the start of the program, Paul? You missed it actually. That they made the Bible sound really, really boring, so people aren't excited by God, and that's why they turn to the beast and the sexy bad guys and the Lord of Death and the cash, because it sounds sexy, it does, and it sounds exciting. I can get with that. I can understand that, because I've always been attracted to the dark side because of that very reason. And then I read Michael's book, and that's the missing piece that somehow has been taken for some reason. And I suspect why. It's because the church has been infiltrated by this dark force, that we turn away from God because we don't know who the bloody hell God is. God is a piece of cardboard. God is a blank white wall. And, it's been taken out, sucked out. We don't know. That's why I was crying when I read Michael's book, because there's a missing, that's the missing, we've been lied to, and it's been hidden from us, it's been stolen from us, and we don't know who it is. So of course we find these powerful creatures sexy and exciting. We want to talk about them all the time because we're hungry for spirituality, and we've only got the bad guys, the good.
Well, this is the problem. I mean, the gospel has been so watered down. I mean, you would be lucky to actually hear, the lordship of Jesus Christ even stressed in the gospel. I mean, it really is so watered down for whatever reason. We can spend all day.
Yeah, that's what we've been saying. So yeah, your book is fantastic, Mike. It really does feel it's really needed. Are you going out there? Are you managing to get it out there?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of numbers, units and sales, it's doing well, but if you go to Amazon, and look at the reviews, I think I don't know, we're at about 150 reviews now.
That's really good.
Yeah, and it's like all 87% 5-star, and if you throw in the 4 stars, it's 90, in the high 90s. So people are responding to it well. But if you actually read the reviews, the thing that I appreciate about them is, again, voices like your own that, positively or negatively stated, either we've been lied to or where has this been all my life, and to me, that's all legit because, yeah, I get it. I lived through that. I went through that whole process as well. But people are sort of having this thrill of discovery is kind of ignited in them. And that's really, something I was hoping to see. Not that, again, this is an academic exercise and Mike gets to be right about this or that, because that's the way academics think. But what I wanted to see happen was that, agree or disagree. Are you now not only more interested in Scripture than you were before, but can you see what the point of it is more clearly, and is that what's attracting you to spend time in it? and you see a lot of that in the reviews. So yeah, it's doing well, in terms of sales, and the publisher is happy because they should recover their cost on this. They invested a lot in it, but they're also in it for the long haul. They knew it would be controversial. They were committed to it, and we had to have those discussions up front. That. And initially, they didn't understand it, so I actually had the people who wanted to publish it read the book before we'd really get to that point, so that they would understand what they were getting into.
But it's excellent. The titles are fantastic. The title, the book itself, and the way it's so easy to read. I mean, young people can pick it up and read it. It's not difficult, because usually books like this, you read the first page and you think, oh God, it's so stodgy, and they use really convoluted language, and it's like, aren't I really clever? Because I get, especially the English, they're like, I'm going to show off now.
Academese.
Yeah,
I can speak academese.
Yeah, and it's not fair on the rest of us. And you haven't done that, but that's typical. That's typical of Americans. I think American academics don't need to do that, and their books are a lot more accessible. I think the English, we tend to sort of show off a bit. Maybe not certain writer. Graham Hancock, I like some of his books. Are supernatural. It's obviously
he's a good writer.
Yeah. Like he is the same style.
Are you familiar with John Lennox, Mike?
I am. I actually have his little, I guess it was a Veritas lecture. They put it in paperback form, his little lecture on miracles, sitting on my desk here. So yeah, I know who that is.
Yeah, he's from Northern Ireland, where I'm from, and I've been speaking to his assistant about possibly getting him on the show. I don't know whether he will, but I think because we've had you on, Mike, it might help. because John Lennox is obviously he's a maths professor from Oxford, originally. But I bought his book when he was debating Richard Dawkins.
Right, yeah.
He's written an excellent book called "Gunning for God," about the new militant atheism and the hubris involved with the new aggressive atheists like Dawkins and his followers.
Yeah, Lennox is quite good.
Hello? Oh.
I don't know. Did we lose Paul?
I think we have. I don't know why. Everything went quiet, and I was like, oh, okay. And even the interference stopped. Oh, I don't know. Revolution Radio has been a really dodgy the last couple of shows. It's been awful. I don't know why. I'm going to have to speak to Hawk. Yeah, we haven't got that much left of the show. What I wanted to ask, people talk about archonic attacks and spiritual attacks. Have you ever had spiritual attacks?
I have not directly. I mean, I have, without getting into too many details. I have one of my daughters, one of my children, for lack of a better term, has been visited a couple times, but it's not something that we allowed to develop. We had when the times that it's happened. I have sort of a again kind of an underground network of people who specifically devote themselves to praying in regard to such things. And of course we talk to her and give her, I hate to say it this way because it sounds so dull, but we give her good theology about that. But those are the only episodes that I could think of as far as something that I thought was sinister in that area.
When people get that kind of thing, because I've had that that kind of thing, like you get awful images and that kind of thing come up, and you get the terrifying nightmares. And as I was saying last week when I was talking to Colonel Michael Aquino, himself is a great he started the Temple of Set, and I got a lot of spiritual interference from him, like being pulled out of my body, and basically a lot of astral stuff. The kind of creatures that do that, is that demons, or is it archons, or is it the Nakash themselves? Well, the Nakash is one single entity, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. As
Yeah.
far as
So
what we have.
is that the jinn doing that kind of thing, or who does the bidding of the Nakash?
Well, I think when you get these sorts of we're not, we're not told a whole lot. We are told that, again, demons, at least the demonic figures we read about in the Gospels, are one of their roles is to harass people. So that would sort of be kind of the default category. But you have hints in other passages in the New Testament about higher level beings. The glorious ones is one of the titles. You have watchers, of course, that can be, it's a neutral term, but they can be good or evil and that sort of thing. So you get glimpses of other kinds of terms, and Paul's terms. You brought up archon, ruler. Interestingly enough, a lot of Paul's vocabulary is geographical dominion vocabulary. Rulers, thrones, principalities, powers, all this sort of thing, and that's at a different level. We're not told specifically about personal attacks other than demons in the Gospels, but I don't think there's a reason theologically to limit it to them. But beyond that, we're not really told, and I think it would depend on the person, whatever their experience. I'd have to evaluate it based upon their description, and if they were given some sort of impression or saw something and whatnot. In the case of our own family, I do sort of assign it to the demonic category because what my daughter saw, she would use terms like they were basically shadow people or shadowy people. In other words, they were disembodied, but yet there was something there, and you could sort of tell it was personal. It wasn't just a wisp of something. That sort of thing. So a disembodied description, that's sort of a classic, demonic, issue.
Why do so many people see these reptilians? People talk about the reptilians on Orion. My last guest on another show spoke about the reptilians on Orion, the queen reptilians there in charge of us. Why do so many people see these, talk about these reptilians and greys? I mean...
I'll be honest with you. I think that is either disguise or window dressing or a masquerade by, sinister entities to propel a certain narrative to us.
Uh-huh.
And the narrative being, again, sort of an alternative human origin story. Usually you hear that in association with, ancient astronaut mythologies and whatnot. But I think those stories are important because they do propel a narrative about, what is the destiny of humanity? Well, we were put here by these alien entities, and they're here to, they started our evolution, out of the animal kingdom, and they're here to help us evolve to this or that, the other thing. And so, we get this notion that we will be as gods, again, to use biblical language, but by an altogether different trajectory.
Uh-huh.
Trajectory that involves other entities. So I actually think the imagery is used again where I can't count someone's experience as being some other's psychological or problem. If this was something that really can't be assigned to those categories, that they actually had this or that experience with a supernatural entity, I think the imagery is selected to propel a narrative that mimics and mimes again the biblical destiny story, the biblical origin story, but with a specific purpose to direct our attention away from the true God to other gods. And this is a convenient way to do it.
You've got a lot of
and you look at the imagery. Go ahead.
I was just going to say you've used a lot of this stuff in your book, The Facade, haven't you?
Yeah.
Why did you say look at the imagery? What did that mean? Look at the imagery, the reptiles and the lizards.
Yeah, in I'm glad Paul brought up the Facade, because in the Facade, which is my first novel, the lead bad guy, when he is not veiled as a human being, he's a watcher. And in certain Dead Sea Scroll texts, watchers are described with serpentine appearance. They're described as asps, for instance. Again, just serpentine in appearance. And I think that the imagery there, I'll give you a couple connections here. There's the imagery there that aligns itself, again, with the ancient astronaut stuff about reptilians. If you remember, I don't know if you're how familiar you are with UFO stuff, but the Billy Meyer story, the guy in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the name of the Pleiadian that he meets, the woman? Do you recall her name?
No, I don't, but I know what you're speaking about.
He spelled it Semjase. It's Semjazi. That's actually one of the names of the lead watchers in the books of Enoch for the leader of the Genesis 6 transgression. So that name is plucked out of Second Temple text. So, Meyer could be fabricating the whole thing, but let's just say that he had this experience. He had some visitation. Why that name? Again, to anyone who's familiar with the literature, that is not a good name. Somebody shows up in your room and says, "I'm this." That's just not a good choice. There are connections. The reason why a lot of Christians sort of get drawn to the UFO stuff is because of the testimonies of contactees and abductees. There are a couple dozen overlaps with what they are told and who they are presumably talking to, and like ancient Jewish or ancient biblical demonology. They're just there. It's just people aren't aware of the content of the texts. But if you are, it just pops up all over the place. I think the imagery is there for that.
A lot of people are saying that the UFOs, they're demons, and these aliens, they're demons. They're not. Do you think then that the reptilians are the watchers?
Yeah, I would. That's the closest category I can see for that.
And that says as much in your book, The Facade.
Well, I don't want to say too much about that. I might give something away, but yeah, there's that connection there. Now, the UFO field is a lot bigger than this. There are, again, you just can't help reading through contactee literature, contactee testimony, and abductee testimony. These connections are there. They have been noticed by non-Christians. For instance, John Keel years ago wrote a book called Operation Trojan Horse. And he was not a Christian, but he said, this is just demonic stuff because of this, that, and the other reason. He was familiar, with the content of the literature. So that's not like a self-styled Christian default position. That's just something that people have noticed since the 60s and the 70s, that the height of the contact era.
Paul, we can't hear you.
Sorry.
You're really cutting out. Oh, he's gone. He keeps coming in and out. I don't know what's going on. So that sounds interesting. That's your novel, is it? That we can buy? Yeah,
the Facade is the first novel, and its sequel is The Portent. And I like to use fiction to piggyback theology, on the fiction. So they're what would be classified as sort of supernatural thrillers, because it's supernatural, it's sci-fi. On the front of the book, for instance, it says, everything, in the book is real. All the documents, all the ancient texts, all the quotations from historical figures, and that's not just marketing shtick. That's real. That's true, and that's deliberate, by design, because I wanted to take things again that derive from real research or real events, and then I was free to connect those things in whatever way I wanted. But there's a lot of ancient text stuff. There's biblical stuff in it. There's Dead Sea Scroll stuff. It's kind of a hodgepodge network of really interesting things, married to paranormal, UFO kind of stuff too. So it's a vehicle begin to talk about certain points of theology. Divine counsel is part of the story. You'll see that pop in and out, with both of them. So yeah, it's a vehicle to try to get people to think about these issues. That's fun. It's entertaining. I've had people get freaked out over it. Obviously. So I don't want to say it's light fun, but it's engaging. It's a good story.
Excellent. The first one, because I've heard you, I know you're very linked with the, there's a community that I'm part of, the Super Soldier community with Douglas Dietrich, Lorien Fenton, and over here we've got the Bases program with Miles Johnson, which is all about mind control. And, they have their little UFO cons. And I know you're linked to that because Lorien Fenton knows you well, doesn't she?
The name is familiar. We may have corresponded on maybe under a different name. I don't know if she's
you've been on her show. You've probably forgotten. She was talking to you about.
Yeah, I've been on over 100 of them. So.
Oh gosh, you don't remember.
What's the name of her show?
Oh gosh, the Fenton Perspective with Revolution Radio. You don't remember? You were talking about cherry pie. For some reason, you and she were talking about cherry pie.
Yeah. That's always. That's always a good distraction. but like the mind control thing. I mean that's part of both novels too. And it's interesting you bring that up because in the first one it's introduced in a very particular scene, something that happens with a soldier at this location that the characters find themselves at. And in the second one, there's a person involved in the story who has a very off the radar, for lack of a better term, ministry to survivors. And that character is based on someone I know.
Right.
Who she partners with somebody else, to do this, and they've been doing it 11 years. They don't have a website, they don't do Facebook. It's completely word of mouth. It's completely off the radar. And on my blog yesterday, we started a GoFundMe campaign to get funding for people that want a week of their time, to again help them deal with what was done to them.
Excellent.
And that derived from a podcast show we did last September.
Excellent. So do you want to mention
the names we gave them were Fern and Sure. If people want to listen to the episode, you go to the Naked Bible Podcast. So nakedbiblepodcast.com.
Right.
It's episode number 68. It's an interview with Fern and Audrey. And those are not their real names, but Fern and Audrey describe what it is they do, who they help. It can be ritual abuse, some sort of trauma abuse. They get some MK Ultra things going on there. But this is what they do full time. Even though they don't advertise, they're not public at all. This is what they do full time. And the problem is a lot of the people they see are either so dysfunctional or they have some other circumstance where it's hard for them to get the money to travel to their location. And again, they have a house, they put them up for a week and there's room and board. And so I'm trying to raise money for them so that they can, right, so the survivors don't have to pay for any of this expense.
Excellent. And so we're going to end in like 2 minutes. It's episode what number?
Episode 68 on the nakedbiblepodcast.com.
Excellent. So I hope everyone out there listened to this really fascinating interview. Someone's phone's ringing. Brilliant. If you can get hold of Mike Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm, he's talked about The Facade, which is a novel based on true life, and The Portent, which is the number 2. And you can find Mike Heiser on his website as well. And join me on Facebook, Christine Joanna Hart. My book, Alien Experiences, is available on Amazon as well by CJ Hart. I don't know if I can hear music fading us out, or I can hear something really, really odd. I don't know what that is. Is that music?
That's music.
It is the music. It's trying to get through. So we've had it. Thanks ever so much for coming on, Mike. You've been a star.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks very much, Paul, as well. Take care.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Bye. God bless.
Revolution Radio.